The year was 1933. A shadow fell over Germany. Adolf Hitler, a name whispered in fear, rose to power. He was the face of evil, but he was not alone. Behind him stood a cadre of men. They were his confidants, his enablers, his executioners. They were the architects of the Nazi regime, a regime that would drag the world into darkness. These men were not mindless followers. They were ambitious, ruthless, and intelligent. Each one craved power. Each one saw in Hitler a means to an end. They believed in his twisted vision, they shared his hatred, and they would stop at nothing to achieve their goals. This is the story of Hitler's inner circle, men like Himmler, the architect of the Holocaust, Goebbels, the master of propaganda, Göring, the Luftwaffe chief driven by greed, Hess, the fervent believer in Nazi ideology. Together they formed a brotherhood of evil. A brotherhood bound by blood and ambition. They were the lords of evil, and this is their rise and fall. The seeds of the Nazi Party were sown in the aftermath of World War I. Germany, defeated and humiliated, was ripe for exploitation. Hitler, a charismatic speaker, tapped into the anger and resentment of the people. He offered them scapegoats. The Jews, the communists, the democracies that had betrayed them. Around him gathered a group of men drawn to his message of hate. Heinrich Himmler, cold and calculating, would become the head of the SS, the Nazis' feared secret police. Joseph Goebbels, a master of manipulation, would weave a web of propaganda that would ensnare a nation. Hermann Göring, a World War I hero, craved power and prestige. He saw in Hitler a path to glory. Rudolf Hess, driven by fanaticism, would become Hitler's deputy, shaping Nazi ideology. These men and others like them made a pact with evil. They swore loyalty to Hitler, and in doing so, they sealed their fate. The Nazi Party, initially a fringe group, grew in strength. Their message of hate resonated with a growing segment of the German population. The economic turmoil of the Great Depression further fueled their rise. Hitler's inner circle, each with their own talents, played a crucial role in their ascent. Goebbels, through his mastery of propaganda, painted the Nazis as the saviors of Germany. He demonized their opponents and created a cult of personality around Hitler. Himmler's SS, growing in power, instilled fear and silenced any opposition. Göring, with his military credentials, gave the Nazi Party a veneer of respectability, and Hess, the true believer, ensured the ideological purity of the movement. Step by step, year by year, the Nazis tightened their grip on Germany. The world watched, mostly in silence, as a nation descended into darkness. The year was 1923. Germany, still reeling from its defeat in the Great War, was a cauldron of political and economic instability. The fledgling Nazi Party, fueled by nationalist fervor and resentment towards the Treaty of Versailles, saw an opportunity to seize power. On November 8th, Hitler and his followers, including a young Heinrich Himmler, stormed a beer hall in Munich in a brazen attempt to overthrow the Bavarian government. The putsch, however, was poorly planned and quickly fell apart. Hitler and several of his lieutenants were arrested, and the Nazi Party was thrown into disarray. Yet, from the ashes of this failure, a new and more dangerous movement would emerge. Imprisoned for his role in the putsch, Hitler used his time to write Mein Kampf, a rambling manifesto outlining his twisted ideology. The book, a mix of autobiography, anti-Semitism, and nationalist rhetoric, would become the blueprint for the Nazi Revolution. It was during this period that Hitler began to consolidate his power within the party, ruthlessly purging those he deemed disloyal, and surrounding himself with a small group of fanatically devoted followers. The beer hall putsch, though a failure, had served as a baptism by fire, forging the bonds of loyalty and shared purpose that would characterize Hitler's inner circle. Among those who flocked to Hitler's banner during these formative years was Heinrich Himmler. a man whose name would become synonymous with the horrors of the Holocaust. Himmler, a former chicken farmer with a meticulous mind and a chilling lack of empathy, saw in Hitler's vision a chance to reshape Germany in his own image. He joined the Nazi Party in 1925, and quickly rose through the ranks, proving himself to be an able organizer and a ruthless enforcer. In 1929, Himmler was appointed head of the SS, a small but growing paramilitary organization originally tasked with protecting Hitler and other high-ranking Nazis. Under Himmler's leadership, the SS underwent a radical transformation. He envisioned the SS as an elite order, a vanguard of Aryan purity and Nazi ideology. Himmler implemented strict recruitment standards, weeding out the thugs and street brawlers who had populated the early ranks of the SA, the Nazi Party's original paramilitary wing. He instilled in his recruits a fanatical loyalty to Hitler and a chilling belief in their own racial superiority. The SS, under Himmler's guidance, evolved from a ragtag band of thugs into a powerful and terrifying instrument of Nazi terror. They would become the architects of the Holocaust, responsible for the systematic murder of millions of Jews and other undesirables. While Himmler forged the SS into an instrument of terror, Joseph Goebbels shaped public opinion. Goebbels, a master of propaganda, used words and images to sway the masses. He exploited economic turmoil, blaming Jews and communists. Goebbels' propaganda was crude but effective, creating a cult around Hitler. His propaganda machine was crucial in the Nazis' rise to power. By 1933, Hitler stood at the pinnacle of power in Germany. The Nazi Party had become the dominant force in German politics. Yet, within this triumph, seeds of distrust and rivalry were already being sown. Hitler saw threats to his authority even amongst his closest allies. The most immediate threat came from the SA, led by Ernst Röhm. Röhm envisioned the SA as the core of a new revolutionary army. This vision brought him into direct conflict with Hitler. On June 30, 1934, Hitler launched the Night of the Long Knives. SS units rounded up and executed leading members of the SA. Röhm was arrested and shot in his prison cell. The purge was swift and brutal, a chilling demonstration of Hitler's ruthlessness. Section 2. The spoils of power, greed, and paranoia take root. With the SA eliminated, Hitler moved swiftly to consolidate his power. He purged the army of any officers deemed disloyal and secured the oath of allegiance from the remaining officers. The SS, now under Himmler's control, became the most feared organization in the Third Reich. The Night of the Long Knives sent a clear message: no one was safe from Hitler's paranoia and lust for power. The elimination of the SA created a power vacuum quickly filled by those eager to prove their loyalty. Hermann Göring, a World War I flying ace, saw an opportunity to expand his power base. He established the Gestapo and set his sights on the German economy. As Minister of Aviation, Göring oversaw the Luftwaffe's expansion, with devastating consequences for Europe. Göring's ambitions went beyond military matters. He amassed a vast fortune through corruption and expropriation of Jewish property. His lavish lifestyle contrasted with the austerity he preached. Göring's greed was matched only by his ruthlessness. He became one of the most hated figures in the Nazi regime, synonymous with corruption and cruelty. Section 3. The shadow of war ambitions ignited. As Hitler consolidated his power, his ambitions expanded beyond Germany. He dreamed of a greater German Reich, stretching across Eastern Europe. War was inevitable to achieve this dream. Within his inner circle, war ignited new ambitions and rivalries. Section 4. Stalingrad, the first cracks in the facade. The early years of the war were a period of stunning success for Hitler and his generals. Poland, Denmark, Norway, the Netherlands, Belgium, and France all fell before the might of the German war machine. The seemingly invincible Wehrmacht, fueled by Hitler's ambition, swept all before it. But the tide began to turn in the winter of 1941 with the German invasion of the Soviet Union. Operation Barbarossa, Hitler's most ambitious gamble, aimed to crush the Soviet Union. The initial stages were successful, but the Red Army was far from defeated. As the bitter Russian winter set in, the German advance stalled. The Battle of Stalingrad became a turning point in the war. The German Sixth Army, trapped and surrounded, was slowly ground down. Göring boasted the Luftwaffe could keep the Sixth Army supplied by air, but the Luftwaffe, stretched thin, failed to deliver the needed supplies. The defeat at Stalingrad exposed the first cracks in Nazi invincibility. It marked the beginning of the end for Hitler's inner circle. The seeds of doubt began to take root. With the Night of the Long Knives, Hitler had secured his position as the undisputed master of Germany. The SA, once a powerful force within the Nazi movement, had been brutally crushed, its leadership decimated. The army, cowed by Hitler's ruthlessness, had sworn their allegiance to him personally. The stage was set for the consolidation of Nazi power, a process in which terror would become the primary instrument of governance. Himmler's SS, once a relatively small and obscure organization, now emerged from the shadows, its power and influence growing exponentially. The SS, with its fanatical belief in Nazi ideology and its chilling efficiency, became the embodiment of the Nazi state, its tentacles reaching into every aspect of German life. The Gestapo, the Nazi secret police under Himmler's control, became a state within a state, its agents operating with impunity, arresting, torturing, and murdering anyone deemed an enemy of the regime. Fear became the defining characteristic of life in Nazi Germany. The slightest hint of dissent, a whispered criticism of the Führer, a perceived lack of enthusiasm for the Nazi cause, could have dire consequences. Neighbors informed on neighbors, colleagues betrayed one another, children were encouraged to report their parents to the authorities. The very fabric of society was being torn apart, replaced by a climate of suspicion and fear. As the Nazi grip on Germany tightened, so too did its grip on the Jews of Europe. Anti-Semitism, a long-standing undercurrent in European society, had been a central tenet of Nazi ideology from the outset. Hitler's twisted worldview, as outlined in Mein Kampf, cast the Jews as an existential threat to the German nation, a parasitic race responsible for all of Germany's ills. With the outbreak of war, this hatred would find its ultimate expression in the systematic genocide of European Jewry. The machinery of death was set in motion slowly at first with a series of discriminatory laws and regulations designed to isolate and humiliate the Jews of Germany. But as the war progressed, so too did the brutality. The Einsatzgruppen, mobile killing squads composed of SS and police units, followed in the wake of the advancing German army, rounding up and murdering Jews and other undesirables in mass shootings across Eastern Europe. The death camps, places of unimaginable horror, were established, their sole purpose the extermination of human beings on an industrial scale. Auschwitz-Birkenau, Treblinka, Sobibor, Belzec, names that would forever be etched in history as symbols of human depravity. Millions of Jews, along with Roma, homosexuals, political prisoners, and others deemed unfit to live in Hitler's New World Order, were murdered in these camps, their bodies disposed of in gas chambers and crematoria. While Himmler was busy building his empire of terror, Hermann Göring was indulging his insatiable appetite for power and luxury. Appointed head of the Luftwaffe, Göring oversaw its rapid expansion, transforming it into a powerful air force. His vanity knew no bounds, his uniforms adorned with medals and ribbons, his fingers dripping with jewels. He built himself a lavish hunting lodge, Karen Hall, filled with stolen art and treasures looted from across occupied Europe. But Göring's extravagance masked a deep incompetence. His early successes in the war, the Luftwaffe's role in the Blitzkrieg campaigns that had overrun much of Europe, had gone to his head. He had surrounded himself with sycophants who told him what he wanted to hear, assuring him of his own brilliance, shielding him from unpleasant truths. As the war progressed, Göring's failures became increasingly apparent. The Luftwaffe, despite its early successes, was ill-equipped for a protracted conflict. Göring's mismanagement and strategic blunders, most notably his failure to provide adequate air cover for the German troops at Stalingrad, contributed significantly to Germany's defeats. Despite these failures, Göring remained convinced of his own indispensability to Hitler, clinging to power even as the Third Reich crumbled around him. He surrounded himself with luxury, indulging in his appetites, even as the German people faced increasing hardship. His greed and his delusions of grandeur would ultimately prove to be his undoing. The pact of evil that bound Hitler's inner circle together was beginning to show signs of strain. The war, once uniting them, now exposed cracks in their unity. Defeats and mounting casualties fueled unease within the Nazi leadership. Hitler's aura of invincibility was fading, replaced by desperation. Paranoia infected his inner circle, suspicions were rife, whispers of betrayal echoed through the corridors of power. Himmler began to make his own plans, securing his position. Göring retreated into fantasy and self-delusion. The seeds of doubt had been sown, soon to bear bitter fruit. The bond between Hitler and his lieutenants was fracturing. Their ambitions and desperation fueled their betrayals. The tide of the war had shifted. The Wehrmacht, once invincible, was now in full retreat. The Red Army, fueled by revenge, pushed westward, liberating territories. The dream of a 1,000-year Reich was crumbling. The news from the front was a constant drumbeat of defeat. The casualties were staggering, the shortage of manpower was critical, the Luftwaffe was being outfought by the Allies. Göring's promises of air superiority were hollow. Within the Führerbunker, Hitler raged against the dying of the light. His generals now bore the brunt of his fury. Accusations of treachery and cowardice filled the air. The inner circle was riven by fear and suspicion. The turning point had arrived with the slow realization of inevitable defeat. The dream of conquest had turned into a desperate struggle for survival. As the walls closed in, the true nature of loyalty to Hitler was revealed. The air within the Führerbunker was thick with tension, the stale air heavy with the stench of fear and sweat. Hitler, a shadow of his former self, was racked by tremors and teetering on the brink of madness. The weight of defeat had taken its toll. His gaze flitted between rage and despair. The bunker walls felt like a tomb, closing in on the remnants of the Nazi regime. The sound of Russian artillery fire, growing ever closer, provided a constant reminder of their impending doom. Sleep was a luxury few could afford, haunted by nightmares of battlefields littered with corpses and the vengeful specters of their victims. Paranoia, like a venomous fog, seeped into every corner of the bunker. Suspicions were whispered in hushed tones, accusations leveled with increasing frequency. The once unbreakable bond between Hitler and his inner circle, forged in the crucible of their rise to power, was dissolving into a toxic brew of fear, distrust, and self-preservation. Himmler, the architect of the Holocaust, his hands stained with the blood of millions, now saw his own survival as paramount. He engaged in secret negotiations with the Allies, hoping to barter the lives of Jews for his own freedom. Göring, his greed and vanity undiminished even in the face of defeat, clung to the illusion that he could somehow salvage his own position, even if it meant betraying his Führer. The Führer's inner circle, once a brotherhood of evil, was disintegrating from within, each man now looking out for himself. The news that Himmler, the once loyal Reichsführer SS, had attempted to negotiate a separate peace with the Allies, struck Hitler like a physical blow. Betrayal, a concept he had long feared, had come from the one he had trusted most to carry out his most horrific orders. The man who had built the machinery of the Holocaust, who had overseen the extermination of millions, was now trying to save his own skin by betraying his Führer and everything the Third Reich stood for. In a voice hoarse with rage, Hitler stripped Himmler of his ranks and titles, condemning him as a traitor. But the damage was done. The seeds of doubt, sown by defeat and nurtured by paranoia, had blossomed into full-blown mutiny. If Himmler, the architect of terror, could betray him, then who could be trusted? Göring, sensing an opportunity in Hitler's weakened state, made his own move. From his luxurious retreat at Berchtesgaden, he sent a telegram to Hitler, requesting permission to assume leadership of the Reich. It was a brazen act of treachery, one that Göring, blinded by his own vanity and ambition, seemed to believe would be successful. He had misjudged his Führer. Hitler, his rage fueled by a potent cocktail of paranoia and amphetamines, saw Göring's request for what it was, a coup attempt. He ordered Göring's arrest and stripped him of his remaining positions. The man who had once been his closest confidant, his trusted deputy, was now another enemy of the state, another traitor deserving of his wrath. The Führer's inner circle, once a formidable force united by a shared belief in their own destiny, was now in ruins. Betrayal, suspicion, and the stench of defeat permeated the air within the bunker. The men who had climbed to power together, their hands dripping with the blood of millions, were now turning on each other, their ambitions and their desperation fueling their betrayals. The end, when it came, would be swift and brutal, a fitting epitaph for a regime built on hate, terror, and the delusion of its own invincibility. The air in the Wolf's Lair, Hitler's heavily fortified headquarters, was thick with fear. The Führer's authority was shattered by the Allied advance. The war was lost. Germany lay in ruins. Only one man could end this madness. Among the plotters were Hitler's trusted lieutenants. Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg emerged as a leader. They planned a desperate gamble to assassinate Hitler. A bomb in a briefcase would be detonated. With Hitler dead, they would arrest the SS leadership. The plan depended on split-second precision. It was a risk worth taking. On July 20th, 1944, Stauffenberg entered the conference room. He placed the briefcase under the table and left. Minutes later, the bomb exploded. The Wolf's Lair shook with smoke and debris. For a moment, it seemed their gamble had paid off. Heinrich Himmler, architect of the Holocaust, saw the writing on the wall. The war was lost, Germany's defeat inevitable. His only concern now was his own survival. The news of the attempted assassination of Hitler reached Himmler. His initial reaction was fury, but then a different calculation took hold. Perhaps, Himmler thought, an opportunity had presented itself. He contacted Allied intelligence, offering a separate peace for his safety. Himmler's gamble, like that of the conspirators in the Wolf's Lair, was doomed to fail. The news of the attempted assassination of Hitler reached Hermann Göring in his luxurious retreat at Karenhall. The Reichsmarschall, once the second most powerful man in Germany, had retreated into a world of self-indulgence. Göring's initial reaction to the news was one of disbelief, followed by indignation. How dare anyone, he fumed, attempt to usurp his place as Hitler's successor? He, the hero of the early war years, was the only one worthy of leadership. Or so he believed, fueled by years of sycophancy and self-deception. Driven by ambition and fear, Göring made a fateful decision. He sent a telegram to Hitler, suggesting he should assume leadership. It was a clumsy power grab, betraying his overinflated sense of self-importance. Hitler, paranoid and injured, saw Göring's telegram as confirmation of his worst fears. He accused Göring of treason, stripped him of his ranks, and placed him under house arrest. The man who once basked in Hitler's favor was now a prisoner in his own gilded cage. His fall from grace was swift and brutal, a testament to the fleeting nature of power and the corrosive effects of greed. Section 4. The Bunker's Last Days. A symphony of madness and despair. The Führerbunker, deep beneath Berlin, had become a tomb of fear and desperation. The Red Army's advance was unstoppable, shaking the bunker's foundations. The Third Reich was reduced to rubble, its fate sealed. Hitler, racked by tremors, clung to power. His voice, now a whisper, echoed through the bunker. Generals spoke in hushed tones, faces etched with fear. The bunker's inhabitants moved with numbed detachment. Eva Braun tried to maintain normalcy amidst chaos. Goebbels penned his final pronouncements, delusional to the end. The atmosphere grew increasingly surreal. A macabre wedding united Hitler and Eva Braun. Goebbels poisoned his children, loyal to the end. The bunker became a stage for a final, grotesque performance. Section 1. The Final Curtain. A pact broken, a regime shattered. In the depths of the Führerbunker, the pact between Hitler and his inner circle crumbled. On April 30th, 1945, with Russian shells raining down, Hitler chose suicide. His dreams lay in ruins, his legacy a toxic stain on history. Joseph Goebbels followed, murdering his 6 children. Heinrich Himmler, the architect of the Holocaust, attempted to negotiate his survival but was captured and took cyanide. Section 2. Echoes of Evil, the Nuremberg Trials and the Reckoning of History. The world emerged from the ashes of World War II haunted by genocide. The Nazi crimes defied comprehension. Justice demanded a reckoning. The Nuremberg trials marked a turning point. Leaders were held accountable by the higher laws of humanity. Hermann Göring's arrogance was a testament to his delusion. He cheated the hangman's noose with cyanide. The trials exposed the Nazi regime's machinery of terror. Witnesses recounted atrocities, a reminder of human evil. The evidence was overwhelming, the guilt undeniable. The Nuremberg trials established a precedent for international justice. They warned future generations, crimes against humanity will be judged. Section 3. The Long Shadow Lessons Unlearned, Vigilance Eternal. Decades have passed since the fall of the Third Reich, yet the shadow of the Nazi era still looms large. The world must remain vigilant against extremism, the normalization of hate speech, the erosion of democratic values. We must remember that the Holocaust was not an aberration, but the culmination of a long process of dehumanization. For the future of humanity, we must remain vigilant, united, and never forget.